Good afternoon. Call this meeting to order. Roll call will be next. James Langhorne,
Here.
Ken McClellan,
Here.
Vincent Wood,
Here.
Marcia Zillis.
Here.
Next, we're going to move to a open public comment for anyone wishing to speak that's not on the agenda today. Trevor?
Yes, thank you. Have several things to pass out to the board here. They're sort of in order. This is, if you remember, we had an issue regarding the retaining wall at 510 North Salsipuedes. Nothing was ever done, but people self-help managed to build a wall. Reason attachment A is on that. I had another follow-up letter, but we're going to sort of do them in sequence. Hate to have you read all of this, but
Mr. Chair, you probably should advise the members of the public how much time they have so they can monitor their time.
We do have, we're giving 2 minutes,
I think I'm.
just a time.
Is that going to be a problem? I'll have Dr. Posch make a,
It's at the discretion of the chair and the board.
thank you.
What kind of time do you think you need?
4 minutes.
And just let me remind the board that on public comment, in order to not violate the Brown Act, you can receive information verbally or, written information, but it can't be discussed. So you're in the listening and receiving mode during public comment. It has to be on the agenda to discuss it or ask questions.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm glad that we have an architect on your board this time, Ms. Phyllis. And I wanted to show you, this is the wall that was built. And as an architect, you know that usually when you note on the plans that you have a finished grade and the wall is off of that finished grade, it's on your property. This is just to illustrate the finished grade that is going to be on 510 Salsipuedes. That's how high a 10-foot wall has to be. However, if you use the finished grade, which is in red, and that's how high it should be. So this wall that was slipped in through the building permit process, but not the design review, is not even close to the issues that Catholic Charities had with privacy, having a situation where the noise that is going to be right across this wall in the playground will be buffeted. And then the third issue is that they're closed, that tenants or their children can't climb over the wall and trespass. So those were the issues that we had, and that's why we had the tall 10-foot and 8-foot walls. That was the issue, and then all of a sudden, boom, this comes in and someone's going to say, oh, non-conforming, but, gosh, it's already built. That's not allowable, I don't think, under the building code, and this has to be stopped.
Trevor, could I encourage you to use the microphone either standing or seated?
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just makes a better record for us.
button.
Have a chair if you'd like.
Green light.
Green light's on.
Okay.
Have a chair if you'd like to.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Quickly, again, summarizing the issues that we have, this committee did ask that another structural engineer review that wall, and we had, it literally would have tilted over in an earthquake and killed somebody if they were adjacent to the wall. Stanley Mendez, who is a very well-known structural engineer in the state of California, has repeatedly said that. So, our concerns were, hey, we just need to reinforce that wall correctly. And all of a sudden, it wasn't reinforced correctly, it was put up on a quick as-built basis, and we discovered it. Dr. Posch and I went to Catholic Charities and said, hey, what's that wall? You know, and not having heard from the board here, we assumed that nothing had been done. And it appears that nothing was done other than people self-help building that wall. Totally unacceptable. Not permitted. How do we know what's in that wall? It looked to me when I walked along that wall that it was basically a very quick, cheap, get it up as fast as you can. And I've taken a lot of pictures of it, but you know, this picture that you have in front of you certainly illustrates the issues that we had originally, and it's totally unacceptable. I just can't see anyone going along with this issue, but again, that's for
Yeah.
your discretion.
Thank you. Thanks for your comment.
And one last comment, I think that we should have this on your agenda if we have any questions. I think it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask, do you have copies of the documents you gave to the board, or should I get a cop? Okay, could you give a copy of one each to Crystal for the record? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're still to the open, any comment for anyone like to speak?
I just have one question that I'd like to ask. Can we just, for the records, give the names of the other board members that are here?
We will.
Okay.
But okay, and so that was our CAS specialist and senior plans examiner, Elizabeth Sorgman, who was just wanting us to recognize the board members that are here, and I was going to do that before the first official item of the hearing. So we do have, I think at our last meeting, we had Eric here, Peterson. He's recently sworn in as recently as, I think, less than an hour ago. Yeah. So he's eligible now to serve on the board. So you may see him at the board table. And we have Kevin Steenberg, thank you, who works in San Diego for San Diego City Fire, and lives up here in Santa Barbara. And he will hopefully be getting sworn in soon, so he can join us at the board table as one of the board members for the hearings. And I think everybody knows Bonnie Elliott, who's here. So we've asked all the board members to come, Mr. Chair, because the topics we're going to discuss are worthy of their comment. I don't think there's going to be any motions. I don't foresee any. There might, but if there are motions, they would come solely from the members of the board seated at the table here. And that's all. We can go to the next item.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Crystal's reminding us that we need to close public comment.
Yes. Okay, at this point, we will be closing public comment and move on to the approval of the minutes from the Building and Fire Appeals Code on 7/7/16. Are there any questions or comments from the board? We need a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Second. Vince? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we move on. Are there any announcements from staff? No? Other than the postponement of 314 West Ortega? Is that
Correct, Mr. Chair, and I believe we pulled that off of the agenda.
okay?
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Next, we have a discussion item as board members' communication during meetings. Staff would like to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had received phone calls from a couple board members over the course of the last 2 months, concerned or interested in better understanding sort of the rules of communication and how and when, what's appropriate to say during a meeting. And so I thought we would just take some time to have that conversation amongst ourselves so that I can give you some input into what I've seen and you can tell me what it feels like, and we can kind of hopefully come to a mutual understanding of what's appropriate to say and how to say it. And maybe we can even have some fun and practice with something as silly as, the item before us is, is Old Spanish Days a good idea or not? But I just wanted to open up that conversation. Marcia and I had talked about it, and so had Bonnie and I over the course of the last couple months. And I think and you'll also see this, and then we discuss the next item because I think there'll be some overlap here. But I think it's important for the board to be conscious and cognizant of you are the sort of assurers that the decisions that the fire marshal and my office make are the best decisions for the community at large. And there's lots of different pressures that you face when you're on the appeals board, because you have people who can feel very adamantly one way or the other, and you get a fairly good perspective of just the ends of the spectrum, and sometimes you have to find that place in the middle where it comes together. Other times it's a little, it's a little different, but don't feel pressured. Take your time. Share your insight, your knowledge in summary fashion. Before you state your opinion, if you want to give some qualifying remarks about why you think you're qualified to make the opinion you're going to make. Jim does this well a lot of times. He talks about past experience and other projects that he's worked on or been involved with. Training that you've gone to that's part of your professional licensing requirement or continuing education units. I'm probably talking a little fast. I'll slow down. And then after you've maybe stated your sort of qualifying remarks, the basis for the input that you're going to give, maybe your decision that's forthcoming or your perspective on the situation. Old Spanish Days, if I were a board member, I might say something like, is Old Spanish Days a good idea or not? Well, I've only been in Santa Barbara for 2 years, and it was 12 years before that when I worked in Santa Barbara, so my experience is fairly limited. However, Old Spanish Days appears to be exciting time for children and the community to celebrate their history and their heritage. Therefore, I think it's a good idea. Now, when I'm going back and Crystal's going back and we're writing out the board decision, I know I can go back and I can say, hey, Andrew thought that was good for young people. It was good for people to celebrate their heritage in the city, and that was the basis for his opinion. So that's just kind of an example of how that might work. And then I open up the discussion now for the board. If you have specific questions or comments that you'd like to make, we can discuss it. And you can invite anybody from the public to come comment on this item. Board members.
Yep.
Yeah, come on
Yes,
up.
come on up.
We would like you to come up, so we get it recorded. Yeah.
Just that. Quick push the button. Yeah. Chair malfunction.
We got it stuck on something.
Hi all. My question is just about what if a member of the public is making a blatantly false statement? Are you allowed to disagree with them? I mean, if they're saying something is code, for example, and it's not, and we know it's not, I mean, are we going to pull out our code and say it's not, or do we just say, well, I don't believe that that's true, and move on?
So my experience with that has been, most of the time, having the debate of whether or not it's in the code or not isn't very fruitful, because the person who's saying it is going to be adamant that it is. And if it's simple, if someone's saying, minimum egress width for a door is 18 inches, and you're like, no, man, I know it's not 18 inches, it's 30 or 32 or 34 clear or something. A clarification like that's probably appropriate, but if they want to argue, oh, no, it's 18, and, I could tell you why. Oftentimes, you'll watch city council when they deal with people who come in and they have opinions that are, just really difficult to kind of relate to. They just say thank you, and that's testimony they can consider. They can keep it in their mind, use it as a fact, as a basis, or they don't have to. So
And then my opinion is that I agree with that. I don't think it's the place to get into an argument with somebody. You can either respectfully disagree, or just say I appreciate your opinion. So anyway. Thank you.
I don't know, did the board have any comments on that they wanted to offer?
On what Eric just
Yeah,
mentioned?
on what Eric just mentioned.
Yeah, we had an issue a while back. It was code, but it was city municipal code regarding how long someone could speak. And I was just flummoxed. I couldn't believe that things were just running away the way they were. And the city attorney really didn't know and took the opposition to come in, bring a copy of the city municipal code to get things to stop. Things have been done to remedy that. I was very grateful for that.
So we do have some control. Andrew, I have to say you're very good at conducting or helping to conduct these meetings. And you're not obviously not conducting them, but that helps a lot. Just another comment while I'm here. But
I have it. If we're ready to move on, I can say that from having been on, the committee for a while, that a lot of the sidebar discussion we appear to be having really had to do with the fact that none of us hear as well as we should. And some of us really haven't adjusted, taken those measures in our life to address things, such as improving our hearing through devices or what have you. So I can remember a number of conversations that occurred while I was here that had to do with just that, trying to understand what was being shared.
Verbally.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And if I talk too soft or mumble, because I do have a propensity for talking softly, feel free to, kind of give me the high sign. Tell me to move my microphone closer to my mouth and talk more clearly. And you can do that with any of the people, anybody you're trying to listen to, if you have a hard time hearing them. Was there anybody else that wanted to make a comment? Bonnie, do you want to?
Bonnie?
Please. Andrew, while Bonnie's coming forward, could we settle on what that sign should be? Because I'm one of those people that needs to.
Yeah, we can. What's important in our hearings is that we understand the situation as best we can. And if something's impairing you from understanding, whether it's the length of someone's dissertation, the volume of documentation they give you, the way they talk, their accent, it's okay to politely say, I really want to understand what you're saying. I'm having a difficult time right now. Could you speak louder, more slowly? Put your mouth closer to the microphone. That's all fair game because you want to truly understand what they're communicating in order to evaluate it. And you don't have to feel rushed. You shouldn't feel rushed to have to make that. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to, protract the meeting, make it longer. We do want to get a good record. We want everybody on the board to understand what's being communicated.
Hi. I'm glad we're having this discussion. I guess the question I have, we talked about speaking slower and asking questions and things like this. I feel like sometimes in several of the other items that we've had in the past that I don't have all the information and I haven't asked, quite honestly. I didn't know quite what to ask. But I feel like we're only supposed to talk about a certain part of a project or something. And to me, it's frustrating just because we don't know what's affecting the rest of the project, and I know it's when it gets to this point, it's already been discussed and approved and all that stuff. But I guess my question is, we're only looking at a small portion of a picture, and and I feel like we're not making a real good decision because we're not given the full picture, and I'm concerned.
So, and this is a good point. You are brought in a lot of times on one small aspect of a very large project, and there's a balance in there because our authority as a board only spans a certain part of that project. That said, you should still feel comfortable pausing when you don't have all the information you need. And if someone makes a motion, you'll see this with city councils sometimes. Someone will already, kind of have a really strong opinion on an item on the agenda, and I don't really see it here that much, but I've seen in other jurisdictions where they'll rush to a motion. I'm going to move to approve, and you're like, wow, we haven't even had like a minute of discussion yet, on the item. And, some of the other council members or board members can say, I appreciate the motion to try to expedite the meeting. However, I am going to vote against the motion because I think we need more discussion on this item. I need more information. totally legitimate, said professionally, and then when you take the vote, everybody knows what to expect. There may be other people on the board that feel similarly. They may be saying, kind of amen. I feel the same way. That was kind of rushed. So you can use that. The awkwardness is the Robert's Rules of Order that we operate under, but the end result, we want to have good communication, and we want the board members communicating with each other and with the testimony that they get from the public, questioning staff. It's okay to overrule me. If you hear something and see something differently than I do or the fire marshal, as long as it's not, against, obviously against the law, we can't waive code requirements, but you have discretion, and you can exercise that discretion relative to the decisions that you make. It's okay. You're not going to offend Joe or I, the fire marshal or I, if you overturn us. We value your input, and that gives us guidance when we face those issues the second and third time, right? We can say, I have a pretty good idea where my board lies on this, and they represent the community, so we probably ought to take that into consideration when we're making our discretionary decisions.
And I guess my last comment, or since I'm new at this and I'm not very good at public speaking, I found it very difficult. I found it a couple of times difficult to butt in on the board, just on an item or whatever, and that's my downfall right there. But I guess what I'm asking is, how do I butt in other than rudely? I want to, never mind. But when I'm not finished with something, or when I think I want to add something else, how do I do that?
Mr. Chair, may I have a moment? That's how I do it. Right?
Oh.
Mr. Chair, I go right to the chair. Mr. Chair, can I respond to that? So you can certainly do that. I mean, if a motion's getting rushed or some discussion's kind of coming to closure and you still think it needs more discussion or you have questions, you can feel free to,
Okay.
And, if it's really a busy conversation, then sometimes you kind of have to chime in and, say, Mr. Chair, it's me over here, and I need some time.
Thank you.
Sure.
I remember when I brought my issue up with you was regarding the last meeting that we had, and there were the issues of what the codes were regarding ADA compliance and also the issues that Santa Barbara pretty much has as an environmental and historic preservation issues, free will pretty much. They do what they want to do. And so it seemed like, as an architect, the architects are being attacked for not understanding what those codes are. And I was trying to address the issue rather than, and on second thought, later, afterwards, I realized, well, the only requirement I have every 2 years to keep my license up is that I have to take 5 hours of, CES courses on, the current ADA regulations. And so that's the only requirement for us. So I was trying to say we do have a background in it, and it is a requirement in this state that we do meet. So it's not that we don't understand the code, there are other issues at stake. And I didn't realize it too much later, so I was trying to find a way to talk to you, to get the information to you, because usually the applicants or whatever, afterwards you meet with them outside, and they sort of discuss how they feel about the way things went. And so I didn't know how to do that.
Right, and so that's part of that, giving your qualifying remarks right at the beginning, kind of trying to set the foundation for why you're going to have the opinion that you're going to have or the questions that you have, right? So it's a habit, it's a practice thing,
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, come on. Grab a chair.
In regards to the, again, Trevor Martinson, in regards to the ADA requirements, I have found through many years, and when I first came here to Santa Barbara, I took a temporary job up at the university. And here we are, university architects, everyone starting to say, well, this is the ramp that we can use. It was too steep. The only way you can express and show them is to, and I said, let's get a handicap chair and wheelchair. It's funny to see 3 or 4 architects not able to wheel themselves up a ramp, and they finally realized that, hey, we got to change this. But this is the thing that I always found in my practice is put yourself in your client's shoes. And in this case, especially if you're blind, try walking. You're going to find it very difficult, but once you start feeling certain things, it's very important. And that's why I would probably disagree with the Sandman's issue.
Mr. Chair, we can't mention any projects during
Right.
this.
But anyway, that was current for you, and that's why I mentioned it. It didn't seem right, but maybe I don't know all the facts.
We shouldn't discuss that at this meeting in order to not violate the Brown Act. That was one of the warnings that we got from the city attorney, and me having this discussion today was, we've done a pretty good job up to this point, so let's hang in there. Don't mention any specific
No.
projects.
Good example.
All right, I guess my question is, and he may have a great point on this wall height, but why did we bring it up if we're not going to do anything with it?
So this was really actually pretty
I'm
timely.
confused what we're doing here.
So this was timely. So you're going to receive information during a hearing. Some of it's going to come at public comment. Your obligation is to receive that information. It is not your obligation to read it, digest it, and act on it, because it's not on the agenda. It's just public comment. Now, you can choose to do with that what you want as board members and individuals. If you want to go back and read that and you have questions, you have two ways to approach those questions. You can call me and say, hey, I got a question about this. What's going on? Or you can say, I would really like to have this item put on the agenda next month because I think this warrants some discussion after reading it. I think it warrants more discussion. Those are two appropriate ways to deal with it. What we don't want to get drawn into is during public comment, someone putting something down and then feeling obligated to read it, understand it, and act on it. It's not on the agenda. It's a Brown Act violation if we do that. And you're not really going to be prepared to deal with it because you just got it, 30 seconds ago. With any input you receive, especially public comment, that's not on the agenda, you just receive it, and then you determine what you want to do with it. Now, we had a hearing where someone came in with 100 and some odd pages for an item, and they wanted to go through the 100 and some odd pages with us. You're under no obligation you can meter the amount of information you want, and I think we've set that up now in our procedures. But it's also legitimate and fair if you're hearing an item like this item, and you say, and there's no motion or action on this, but let's say it was an appeal item. You could say, I've got 160 pages of information here that I want to digest before I make my decision. I think we should postpone this discussion till next meeting so I can really go through this. And we'll talk about that in the next item that we have on the agenda, because I have an outline for you for that.
Okay, well, that clears it up for me, yeah.
So I'm Elizabeth Sorgman. I am the city plans examiner and the CASP, certified plan checker. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you to all of you, to new and old board members that are on this, because you do face a lot of angst when you are having to listen to opposing parties. And again, by the time you get to, by the time a project gets to you, it's because we've already reviewed it, made a particular position, taken a position, and not all members of the public are in agreement with it, or they want to challenge it. So if you need more time, if you want direction, please feel that you can ask for assistance. Take advantage of the fact that we're here. And again, if you need more time, I can't emphasize that enough. It doesn't have to be decided at that meeting if you need more input. And again, I just want to thank all of you, because it is sometimes difficult to come to a determination. And I think since Andrew's become building official, this board is being used more for the accessibility ratification projects that we have to come and present. And so those get emotional sometimes, and but we're here to to go through that process and be democratic, and you don't have to support what we say. I mean, our feelings aren't going to be hurt if you decide, Elizabeth, we didn't like what you did, and I mean, really, this is part of the job, and I welcome whatever challenges, whatever questions you have. I'm there to give that information to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So that's my kind of report on that, or facilitated discussion. If there's more discussion the board would like to have, you can certainly take it from here, or we can move to the next item. There's no motion necessary for this item.
Anybody more from public comment? Not, we will close this public comment at this point. Does the board have any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes?
I do. Following up on what Elizabeth had to say, how do we best direct our inquiries to staff for clarification on a code issue or any other information that might help us with our decisions?
Good question. They really, protocol-wise, they should go through me or Joe, the fire marshal or the building official. So we're aware of the conversations that are being had. If you have an access compliance question about accessibility, I'm probably not good. I can tell you I'm not the expert on that. So if I can't answer it quickly, I'll send you to Elizabeth or one of our certified staff if we have more staff certified. So you get the right answer from someone who really understands the code. But that protocol of going through the fire marshal, the building official, just keeps us in the loop so we don't get caught sideways, not knowing a conversation was had and what the result of that conversation was.
Thank you.
So then, Elizabeth would be available to answer our questions. I know I've asked you a number of times on different issues, because you're right here, you're on the board, but it's okay to ask a member of the audience to come forward and...
Yes, and what we're trying to do, Marcia, is we're trying to make sure that Elizabeth is available at the hearings where we do have access compliance items. Because she is, and we actually, you'll probably notice that we'll have Elizabeth, Christy Foreman, who's tested for the Certified Access Program and come really close. She's waiting to find out if she passed it this last time. And then her supervisor, Lonnie Cassidy, will also be here. So we try to provide enough resource here that if you do have questions, you can certainly point to one of our staff and say, hey, help us with this.
Okay, great.
And clarifying something here, and that is during the course of a meeting, not outside of a meeting.
Correct.
Staff inquiry should not...
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Outside of the meeting, if you see an agenda item and you're reading the report and you have questions about it, give me a call.
Okay,
And
thank
if
you.
I can't answer it, I'll get you to Elizabeth or whoever the appropriate person is.
Okay.
And also, if there's no motion required, but someone can make a motion to move forward on something brought to us for more information or public comment about something.
Good point, Mr.
Isn't
Chair.
that right?
Yeah. So as a board member, you have authority. I set up the agenda. Crystal and I try to set it up so that it'll work. But you can look at it like right now. You could say, you know what, I move that we send Andrew to Siberia. All in favor, aye. And off I go. I don't know if you have that authority, but fortunately, but but you could direct me to go do some research and come back. As long as it's not going to cost the city a ton of money or take us completely off track, we'll do what we can to provide you with the information you need to exercise your duties.
Okay. Thank you. At this point, we were closed to move on to the staff response, advance notice and access compliance agenda items. Would staff like to present?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just realized I don't have enough copies, so let me go grab another one. There's extra copies over by Bonnie there if anybody needs them. Thank you, Eric. I just put together an outline for my response to the request that was made. I think the motion was made by Marcia that we look at ways, it was based on public comment at our last meeting, right? We look at ways to try to improve our, to help our accessible community understand the items coming before the board, right, that are access related. How do they get noticed so they can prepare and contribute to the hearing? So when I was thinking this through and kind of went through several renditions of outline, there are kind of two separate issues, I think, here. We talked about one a little bit already, and that is having to deal quickly with complex issues, whether it's access compliance in this case or any complex issue. And again, I'll go through this, but don't feel rushed, right? Take your time. The decisions you're making can last 30, 40, 50 years. So, 30 more days of study and discussion, or, of study and then another discussion or hearing is not necessarily inappropriate. The other aspect of this is trying to get the benefit of the input from folks in the accessible community that are experts, either by user or by study. And that seemed to be sort of, I think, maybe the key point on that. Let me go through the dealing with complex issues and give you an idea what the laws are and then the kind of the rules are that we operate by. And the most overarching rule is the Brown Act. So we have to publish an agenda 72 hours before a meeting. If we miss the 72 hours, we have to reschedule the meeting. So what happens is we don't want to be trying to publish the agenda, on hour 73. We want to publish the agenda 10 days before instead of 3 days before. And get it out there so people know. But it's not a legal requirement to do that. We just do that to try to help people understand what's coming up so they can be prepared. This last agenda changed 3 times in between day 7 and day 3. So we can give a lot of advance notice, but it could be for naught. I mean, we could send people on wild goose chases and they're getting all ready for an item at a meeting, and 3 days before we change the agenda. So. Something to keep in mind. We also want our agendas to be, and the access to the agenda item information that's going to be heard to be equitable. So if we send it out to one member of the community, but not to the rest of the members of the community, we're not really equitably giving timeliness access to that information. So, we often, as government does, we pick the lowest common denominator and we operate by that, which is the 72-hour notice. So that we have to do. We have to publish an agenda 72 hours before. And those are the items unless someone requests to remove an item, but nothing can be added to the agenda after 72 hours, once we're in that 72-hour period. We post those agendas outside, on the board outside the room here. That's required by law. We also put them on the website. Our website has a feature, if you've ever been there, you can sign up for automatic emails whenever the website changes. So I've done it because I like to make sure it works. There you go. Eric's got it. So probably courtesy of the city clerk, right? Yeah. So Crystal, she puts an agenda on the webpage. I get an email. I don't know, within 15 minutes or something. Pretty quick. Yeah, 15 to 25 minutes. So you can get the information pretty quick. You're definitely going to get it 71 hours before the hearing. If 72 is the last time we can post. So I would encourage you, if you haven't, to just go on the city website, go to boards and commissions. They have them listed by alphabetically. Find the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals and subscribe. They're just going to ask you to put your email in. Subscribe to the changes, automatic notifications for that. So that's item 2 on here. And all of our web information, well, I shouldn't say that. We try to make all of our web information accessible. The website itself, the software we use for our website is ADA compliant. And the PDFs that we post have, I wish we had some folks here who were visually impaired. Ken may know. But they have translations data behind the words so that you can have it read the text to you. You don't have to be able to see it. If you don't use the right version of Adobe and you don't have the ADA compliance thing turned on, it doesn't work with every PDF. So we try to make sure everything we post is accessible to people who maybe can't read, can't read the words, can't see them, or can't read them. So then on to item 3, under dealing with complex issues. We talked about this already, how to respond to lengthy documents that are submitted at hearings. You can ask someone for a verbal summary, right? If someone drops 160-some pages on you in a meeting, you can say, hey, this is pretty heavy. I'm not going to be able to digest this today. Tell me, what are the key points in here? What pages are they on? And ask them in their 2 minutes to summarize that information for you. If someone can give you a nice, concise summary in 2 minutes on 160-some pages, boy, I'd take it. That's a lot of reading to fish that out. So that's certainly something you can ask. Then when you get a lot of information, you're going to be struggling with the thoroughness of understanding versus the timeliness of a decision, right? And every body, every board or council struggles with that. How much time do we give for discussion and understanding versus what's a timely response period? And that you're just going to have to weigh. And you're probably going to each have slightly different feelings on that based on your expertise and comfort levels. But you're gonna have people who come in on hardship ratifications. They want you to approve it right now today because they don't want to be at risk anymore because they're working at risk. You know, don't feel pressured. That's not something that a burden you need to carry. That's a burden they accepted when they signed the at-risk statement. Now, you want to be sensitive to them, sure, but really, we're talking about work that's going to go in place for 30 or 40 years. So don't feel rushed. Don't feel like you have to withhold any comments you want to make or questions that you want to have answered. You can always move to continue the item to the next hearing. And you can also sometimes, you know, when you ask someone to summarize a large document, you can say, you know, tell me what the key points in here are. And if they can't tell you, you know, you can kind of give them the look like, so why should I read your 160-some pages if you can't summarize it and tell me what's really important in here? I don't need to read a phone book, you know. Everybody's got, well, not anymore. We all used to have them. But that's the duty, that's a burden that the person who gives you the document carries, to summarize that for you and help you understand really what's salient in it. We talked about the overarching duty, number 4 of the board, to assure that the decisions of the building official and fire marshal are in the best interest of the community. The ways you do that, study your agenda packet when we send it out with the staff reports. Underline things that you agree with. You know, underline, highlight things that you don't agree with. You have questions on. Kind of come ready to go. You know, so when that item comes up, you kind of know in your mind where you want to go. Anyways, you're open to how the conversation and hearing goes, but you have sort of an agenda based on what you've read. That I always encourage people to write down their questions and their opinions that they might have on certain things in their packets, so they have it there for them. Obviously, you want to listen actively. And then this we talked about this. So what if you have questions? You know, what if you don't know the details of access compliance for whatever it might be, a doorway width or something like that, turnaround space in a kitchen, accessible kitchen in a dwelling. You can ask city staff. We'll try to have staff available during the hearings. You can ask before if you're reading up and you have a question before the hearing. You can discuss it amongst your fellow board members. You all have great experience in one area or another of construction, and you can rely on that. Ask each other, what's it like to use this feature in a building, or how, is it feasible to be able to design something like this and get all these elements in place as an architect, or a fire protection specialist, or a plumber, or someone who works with iron. So use the strength of the board to your favor. And then lastly, you can also say, I would like to direct the building official or fire marshal to gather input from a third-party engineer, kind of like we did with one of our projects recently, to kind of validate something, right? From a different perspective. That's fine. We can always use third-party validation if that's something that you feel is necessary to make your decision, to give you the information you need. Don't feel pressured, though, to make a decision. Don't ever feel like you're going to don't worry about letting someone down and have that outweigh the benefits of trying to get the community to the safest, most efficient, most sustainable, accessible buildings that they should have according to the state laws and local laws. So that's sort of the complex issues item that I think drives maybe some of the concern for trying to get input on accessibility items. I would encourage the board to consider including the Access Advisory Committee chair in the board agenda minutes packet. So when we're sending out that information to you, the chair of that committee is getting that information, and that might be a nice way to help them without having to monitor it on a website. Have that agenda right in front of them, and then they can make the decision, is there anything in here that we need to weigh in on? Maybe they'll want to show up and provide input. Something is easily done. We can easily add them to the email list. It doesn't cost the city anything, and it does give them some advance notice. And with that, Mr. Chair, we can discuss this further, or and take public comment.
Yep, at this point, we'll take public comment. Bonnie?
Andrew, you just said, well, we can discuss it, we can discuss an item with each other. Like if we get comments before the meeting, we're allowed to talk to each other before that a little bit, like one to one or not? Because I know if it's two or more, it's a Brown Act violation. I mean, or ask them a question. I could ask the fire marshal a question, ask Jim a question, that kind of thing. Is that okay or not?
So you can have conversations with the fire marshal's office and I on any questions you
Okay.
have about an agenda item. I'm not a Brown Act expert. I think you can have a conversation with one other board member, but here's the problem. You have a conversation with one other board member, you don't know it, but they have a conversation with two other board members, and they get a daisy chain, and
Pulling
then
issue, yeah.
and then you're and
Okay.
then you've compromised
Okay.
yourself.
So I misunderstood you then. We can't you can't talk to other board members outside the meeting, but just during the meetings. Okay.
That is the safest policy to assume. Yeah.
Got it.
And always, we have to disclose that prior to making any comments. Like, we would have to say, even if an applicant calls you, I've had
Right.
applicants call me, then I would have to say, well, this applicant did call me, and we had a conversation about this issue before I even begin my comments.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Or if I talk to a board member, it would have to be, but if we talk to staff or you, it's
You can disclose that as well if you'd like, but it's not necessary.
Not necessary.
Because it's public, whoever comes to us gets the same public information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Jim.
In the course of this presentation that Andrew gave, I had a pressing question that I decided to pull out my phone and check, and that was whether we had Wi-Fi access in here. And by that method, I would open up a laptop and look for a code that I was searching for. So that facility is available, but it has to be tolerated. So I thought I'd throw that to you for some feedback.
Yeah, that's pretty sophisticated. So you can do that. I've
Title 24 in my pocket.
Yeah, and I've done this, so I'm going to tell you from some of the lumps on my own head here. You bring your Wi-Fi connected device in, and you're going to use it solely, and then you got emails popping up, and people are texting you, and it's just distracting. At some point, I'll close it because I don't need that. So you have to be really careful about what you have turned on when you're doing that, so you don't get all these things that can distract you from the topic. But it's a great tool. I mean, if you have the title available, Title 24 is available on the state website for free, if you know how to navigate that. Or you can have a copy on CD or something and use it. Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Follow-up question. Yeah, I was concerned that, how my mind works. I'll hear something, and I know I don't agree with that point. And from that point forward, I'm not hearing anything else. So that's why I need that device. I need to clarify for myself so that I can continue with what's being presented, provided I don't provide distraction.
And you can make a motion, though, to postpone to get more information. If you
Yeah,
needed
the
it
problem
at
is
that
I'm
point.
advertising my ignorance, that's all.
Well, I would just encourage the board. You're looking out for the community, and none of us know everything, fortunately, or we'd be taxed to the gills. So just do your best, and if you don't know, you don't know. And if you know but you can't remember, you don't have to assume the pressure of that. That's not your role. You ask, and we'll bring it to you quickly. And if we can, we'll resolve it in the meeting. And if we can't, we won't. But we'll just have to postpone it and research it.
Any other public comment? No. We will close this for public comment at this point. And the final thing will be,
Well, that was
let's see, any board have any other comments related to what Andrew just presented from?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm on this list here, it said of the board members, and yet we've got 2, 3 people out here. how do you choose, makes this list?
So, kind of a procedural question about how we run the meetings. In the city's municipal code, when we adopt the building code, they establish a Board of Appeals, Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals. There is no number established for the number of members to the board, which is really unusual. I think it might be the only board and commission in the city that does this. We could have 100 people assigned to the board. I doubt we'll get there, but and then the code says that the council adopts says the fire chief and the community development director, or their designee, selects the 5 most appropriate board members for the items to be heard. So you can kind of see what and this has been in the codes, gosh, I know for 2 decades, maybe more, here in Santa Barbara. It's different than other cities. Other cities don't necessarily do it that way. They have a standing board. It's like 7 members. That's it. It's always the same 7. You need so many for a quorum. There isn't this unlimited number of people that you have to pick 5 from. So what Joe and I do is when we have items that come before us, we pick the board members that we think are most appropriate for they're going to represent the community the best relative to those items. We've recently been made aware, recently within the last 6 months or so, of, or maybe even 3 months, of the requirement to have 2 physically disabled people sitting at the board while you hear any access compliance appeals or ratifications. And that's in the state health and safety code law, not in the building standards. It's kind of a separate law. So we were honoring that today, and we have, fortunately, volunteers who are both intelligent in how construction works and also can give us that physical accessibility insight. And so that's valuable input both ways. So sometimes we'll pick based on the need for accessibility compliance hearings.
Board, any other comment? Questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
One comment. I wanted to acknowledge Andrew's efforts to be heard today. I was following it very well. Maybe it's because I sat here, but thank you for that. I know we've involved some extra effort on your part.
That's okay.
Yes, and when you were talking about physically disabled people being on the board, I'm feeling like a little bit invisible myself because, I mean, my disability is an invisible disability. Hearing people, of course, can hear. I use a visible mode of communication, so it kind of messes up how I relate to all of you being at the end here, having to look at the interpreter instead of you. So I would love to talk about how we can work better and deal with this as a true team, communicating efficiently. You did talk about the Brown Act and in talking about one-on-one communication. And now I totally understand why we're avoiding outside communication. You know, I'm always concerned about communication access, but that was a new thing for me. And you know, sometimes this whole situation gets hard on the interpreter, and it's a whole different gamut here. So anyway, I've got to develop my confidence being here with all of you, and to let you know, you guys do talk pretty fast for me. So anyway, you know, but I'm admitting how I feel. I feel a little bit of like a chicken here. I'm a little bit awkward joining in with all of you. I know many of you have a lot of experience, and it's been interesting hearing that. And you talked even about how people put down a 160-page document and go on. And we talked about, 1 second. The restaurant, De Rio, I believe it's called. Is that, we talked about a restaurant?
Just make sure we talk about topics and not items that we've discussed.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. See, there you go. I'm learning. I'm awkward with all of this. So I do understand now. Thank you. You're pretty black and white. You got to follow the rules here. I get it. Thank you very much. Oh, just by the way, on a totally different topic, Andrew, we've given you a name sign. It's related to your beard there. So that's who you are. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Ken. Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the board relative to this last item before you close it out. Does the board desire to make a motion to have us include the Access Advisory Committee chair in our email list when we send out the agenda packets to the board? And if so, someone should make a motion second and vote, yeah.
Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Andrew.
All yours?
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
Okay, at this point, we will adjourn this meeting. Is there a motion?
I make a motion, we adjourn the meeting as of, what is it, October 4th?
August.
August.
August 4th
3:30.
Ahead
at
of
3:32. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.